Has the left finally come full circle? This supposed progressive student didn't even hesitate, literally defending the inclusion of race as a factor in the hiring process, and Charlie Kirk had to take her to school explaining the most fundamental principle of colorblind merit that America must stand for. Just take a look at this before we dive in.
But the one I want to talk to you about the most is affirmative action and DEI. And in these videos, you have said, quote for quote, white males have high test scores, white males shouldn't have to be penalized. You did acknowledge and say that people of color come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds that do not prioritize education much. But instead of making a suggestion on how to help those communities and continue to build those communities up, you continue to say that our institutions are becoming less excellent. And I'm confused as to what your definition of excellence is. Is that because white males aren't necessarily, in your opinion, getting accepted as in a higher rate, even though they technically are, because 41% of college admitted students are of the white race?
It should be higher than that, yeah.
Based on what? Where are you getting the statistics? I just want to understand.
It's a good question. The Supreme Court did a whole case on this, and it ruled against affirmative action, and we saw the books of Harvard. So
I don't want to cut you off. May I know for future reference, so I can understand where you're coming from and get more context, could I know the Supreme Court case?
Yeah, so the name, 2.5 years ago, I think it was something out of California. Someone look it up. You could use Grok or ChatGPT.
If somebody could please look that up for me. Thank you.
So we saw the data out of Harvard. Harvard was the test case, and effectively approximating, but a white male had to get about a 30% higher test score to even be considered than an equivalent black student.
And when was this?
Over 30 years.
It's actually a lot worse than Charlie says here, and a lot harder for the left to justify. That's because it wasn't white students disproportionately scoring high on SAT scores to qualify for elite colleges. It was actually Asian American students, and for several decades at least. A study from Princeton all the way in 2009 revealed that, quote, those who identify as Asian had to score 140 points higher on the SAT than white students and 450 points higher than black students to have the same chance of admission to private colleges. End quote. How difficult is that to square with the collective identity lens of affirmation action? By the way, we're asking the tough questions no one wants to ask, so please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to become a part of the movement. Now, there is a logical fail for the left when minority groups in this country, like Asian or Indian Americans, rise up through sheer merit in private university admissions, and it has almost paralyzed the affirmative action debate at elite universities, especially after the Supreme Court order striking it down 2 years ago.
So basically, for a black student, they could do 30% worse on their standardized scores than an equivalent white student.
And you don't think that has any outside factors to do with it?
Well, that's not the point. The point is whether or not...
But how is that not the point?
Because I don't believe we should accommodate based on outside factors. You do.
Well, I do, because I believe in progression. And I feel like you have stated in multiple of your videos, which I do have a quote.
No, fair enough. I'm just making sure we understand we disagree.
For sure.
I don't think we should change the rules of the game to accommodate...
What were the rules of the game?
Well, the rules of the game are that you should be treated fairly and equally, right?
For sure.
That's an American principle.
And I agree with that completely.
Got it. So, therefore, a white male should not be treated differently than a black male.
But when you come from a different...
Doesn't matter. Equal treatment or not. It's not whether or not you were said mean things when you grew up or whether your dad was a gangbanger. Doesn't matter.
Well, I'm not saying that's not the outside factors I'm talking about.
It doesn't matter what the outside factors are.
But can I explain where I'm coming from?
But understand, I'm going to finish and I'll let you talk.
Okay, of
Equal
course.
treatment is regardless of any sort of sob story you could put on before it. Equal treatment. Test score, test score.
And let me take that a step further. When we're talking about quotas in the hiring process, you have to understand that most jobs are not just positions of power, they're a position of extreme responsibility. I know the left likes to view society through a lens of a power hierarchy, and maybe in that hypothetical world, diversity quotas would make sense, but when you're a doctor, soldier, or air traffic controller, the society around you is relying on your expertise and merit to thrive and function. And it's truly insane that the only person wanting to completely remove race from the equation of the hiring process is put on the back foot in modern culture.
Explain to me why, when we're admitting people for a job, should it just be what's on that piece of paper or should race play into the factor?
So I know that your argument is mediocrity. I forgot. I don't
Mediocrity?
really. Okay, yeah, and I know that, and I also believe in quotas as well, but I don't think that it should be one and one, but they should go hand in hand. Because at the end of the day, if I have just as good as a resume as somebody next to me, I wanna understand where you're getting that jobs are just taking people because they're a woman, because they are black. I just want to see. And I understand what you're trying to say because of course, with affirmative action and DEI, that does give them an upper hand. But where does it say that you take somebody just because of that color?
All over the place. Capital Street Partners back in the summer of 2022 said that they will not hire white men for internships. That's one example of thousands I could give.
But because of how many people are in there, how many people in position? No, because
they wanted to be. Again, that's irrelevant. It does not matter if you have an internship and everyone is a white man. If they're all qualified, that's great. It doesn't matter if they're all Asian or all black. It should be what merit qualification gets the people into that position.
And of course, but if this school only wanted white people to attend.
No, good, like excellent qualified people. And if they end up majority white, who cares? Why does that matter?
I don't think that matters. I'm saying that affirmative action.
No, you are saying it matters.
I'm saying that, but I'm not saying for the white male or the black race or the Asian race or the Indian race, or understand what I'm saying? I'm saying that it works in favor for any race and any sex. It works, and it does 1,000%. And I don't understand where you're getting that information.
It is anti-white racism that was in the fiber of our laws that is now getting away thanks to President Donald Trump. Where if you were a white man, especially to apply for internships, jobs, going to college, that it was significantly harder to get those jobs, to get into those practices, because there were quotas that made it easier for people of other skin colors with lower standards to be able to get those positions.
Now, here's the thing about the last sentence. Someone on the left that advocates for those race-based quotas will listen to him saying we shouldn't lower standards for people of color and assume he's saying people of color can't be qualified, but that's precisely the opposite of what that means. It's a simple statistical fact that if you've got two pools of race groups where one is much smaller than the other, you cannot draw from them equally without compromising standards for the smaller one. It's just math, and it's a similar conflation that Charlie got in trouble for last year when he said he would doubt whether his African-American pilot for his flights was hired on merit, and he said that as a regrettable response to United Airlines announcing that half of their new pilots would be women or people of color, even though they make up just 12 to 14% of the student pilot pools. That's why it's not surprising that DEI perpetuates racism after conflating people's disparities with discriminations, which is exactly what people like Thomas Sowell have been calling out in their writing. I mean, forcing a certain amount of people of a certain color into a position, especially that dangerous, is crazy.
We agree there's only so many slots in a college. Right? There's only so many positions in an internship. It's a limited supply.
I completely agree.
It is scarcity. So when you have a scarce resource, you have to decide how you're going to divvy up that scarce resource.
For sure.
In a DEI model, they're going to say, okay, we're not going to do any more than 30% white, and then we'll do 15%. And so you kind of come up with these quotas. Therefore, they end up saying, well, what happens if the 15% black is not qualified? They don't care, which ends up happening far too often. Or what happens if the
Can you give me examples of cases?
Yeah, air traffic control is actually a really good example. We now have all the documents that show that we went on a hiring spree to have more black air traffic controllers. There's a huge lawsuit about this, 15, 16, 17, where the standards for air traffic control have dropped so dramatically, and you're kind of seeing some of the effects of that, potentially. And again, it's in almost every single corporate practice, every single college institution. But it just kind of comes down to more of a moral argument that I have, which is that if you have something based on merit, I don't care if it's all black, all Asian, all white. It's an excellent group is what I want, not a diverse group. I care about excellence, not diversity. Because I do not believe diversity is a strength. I believe unity is a strength. I believe the pursuit of higher purposes is a strength. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do understand where you're coming from. I feel like I do agree with some of the things that you did just say, and I may have to do some more research on the things that you said before, but I guess we can agree to disagree for the time being. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
There was actually an even more damning report last year when several white air traffic control applicants were part of a class action lawsuit alleging that the FAA did not hire them despite them qualifying the tests, simply because they did not fit into their DEI quotas, and that's just a snapshot of how shrinking the pool of talent to fit shallow racial criteria never works out. But tell me in the comments what you think about this debate, because I feel like we need to have this conversation now more than we ever have.